The $350 million bridge project that made my career started with me helping some guy pick up his tools in a parking lot. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. That guy turned out to be Richard Hoffman, one of the richest men in America, and he was testing us. I passed. Austin Pemberton didn't. And that's how 20 years of getting screwed over finally paid off. I'm Mike Torres, 52 years old, and this is how it all went down. It was around 1:30 in the morning when Austin's text woke me up. Need final specs before 7 a.m. client breakfast. No delays, no pleas, no context, just his usual entitled demands. I'd been at Pemberton Construction for 2 decades, working my way up from apprentice to senior engineer. Austin? He'd been there 5 years and was already VP of Strategic Development. Amazing what having Daddy as CEO can do for your career trajectory. I dragged myself to the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The Riverside Bridge project stared back at me. 18 months of my life in spreadsheets and CAD drawings, load calculations, environmental compliance, safety protocols, every beam placement, every stress point, every weather delay contingency. This wasn't just another job for me. My daughter Sophia's medical school tuition depended on the bonus from this contract, and after my divorce 3 years ago, every dollar mattered. Austin Pemberton was a different story. Kid graduated from Wharton with an MBA and all the confidence that Daddy's money could buy. He had the presentation skills and the networking connections, but ask him about actual engineering and you'd get a blank stare followed by some buzzword salad about innovative infrastructure solutions. While I spent weekends on construction sites, Austin spent them at the country club perfecting his golf swing. The morning of the big presentation, I hit the first snag. The main parking garage was packed. Some corporate event had filled every space. I had to park in the overflow lot near the equipment yard, which meant walking through the construction staging area. Not ideal when you're wearing your one good suit and carrying presentation materials, but I'd dealt with worse. That's when I heard the crash. Metal hitting concrete, followed by some choice words that would make a sailor blush. I came around the corner and saw this older guy, maybe early 60s, kneeling next to an overturned toolbox. He was wearing a hard hat and safety vest, clipboard scattered on the ground along with what looked like inspection forms. Tools everywhere, levels, measuring tape, safety equipment. Now I could have kept walking. Had a presentation in 45 minutes that could determine whether I made senior project director or stayed buried in the technical ranks. But something about the scene reminded me of my Navy days. We had a saying in the Seabees, "You're only as strong as the guy next to you." This guy looked like he needed backup. "Let me give you a hand," I said, setting down my briefcase and crouching next to him. He looked up, surprised. "Don't need to trouble yourself. Know you office folks are busy." "No trouble," I replied, starting to collect the scattered tools. "Looks like you're doing safety inspections?" He nodded, gathering his paperwork. "Compliance review for the insurance company. They want everything documented before the big contract signing." We worked together quietly, reloading his toolbox. He moved with the careful precision of someone who'd spent decades in construction. His hands were scarred and weathered. Working man's hands. Reminded me of my old chief petty officer, guy who taught me that taking care of your people was just as important as getting the job done. "Most folks in suits just walk on by," he said as we finished up. "Navy taught me different," I replied, handing him the last of his tools. "We look out for each other." I grabbed a bottle of water from my truck and offered it to him. "Hot morning for site work." He took it with a nod of thanks. "Appreciate it. Name's Rick, by the way. Mike Torres. I work on the bridge project." Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise exactly, more like he was filing information away. "That's so. Heard it's a big deal." "Biggest contract in company history," I said. 18 months of planning finally coming together. "You do the engineering work?" I almost laughed. "Most of it. But you know how these things go. Engineers do the work, executives take the credit." Rick smiled at that. Strange smile, like he understood more than he was letting on. "Well, Mike Torres, thanks for the help. Not many people stop for the working man anymore." I checked my watch. 8:50 a.m. Time to go play my part in Austin's dog and pony show. "No problem, Rick. Hope the inspection goes well." As I walked toward the office building, I felt good about the interaction. Simple human decency, the kind my dad taught me growing up in El Paso. Help people when you can, treat everyone with respect, and remember that we're all just trying to get through the day. If I'd known that Rick was actually Richard Hoffman, CEO of Hoffman Engineering Solutions, and the man about to decide our company's future, I might have handled things differently. But looking back, I'm glad I didn't know. Because what happened next proved that sometimes doing the right thing for the right reasons is exactly what the situation calls for. I reached the conference room with 5 minutes to spare, straightened my tie, and prepared to watch Austin take credit for my work one more time. What I didn't know was that this time would be different. Very different. The conference room was Austin's kingdom, and he ruled it like the prince he'd always been. Floor-to-ceiling windows, mahogany table that probably cost more than my truck, and Austin positioned at the head like he was about to cure cancer instead of present a bridge design he couldn't have drawn with a ruler and crayon. I took my usual spot in the back corner. 20 years of these meetings had taught me to stay invisible until someone needed actual answers. Austin's presentation materials were spread across the table. Glossy folders with the Pemberton Construction logo and Riverside Bridge Project, a vision for tomorrow, emblazoned on the cover. My 18 months of calculations and engineering work repackaged as his strategic vision. "Good morning, everyone," Austin began, flashing that $1 million smile he'd inherited along with his trust fund. "Today marks a pivotal moment for Pemberton Construction." Charles Pemberton, Austin's father and company CEO, sat 2 seats down looking appropriately proud. The man had built this company from nothing 30 years ago, but somewhere along the way he'd developed a blind spot the size of Texas when it came to his son's actual abilities. The potential client sat across from Austin, quietly reviewing documents. Well-dressed guy, probably early 60s, taking careful notes. Nothing about him screamed billionaire, but these investment types rarely did. They let their bank accounts do the talking. Austin launched into his presentation with the enthusiasm of a game show host. Our innovative approach combines cutting-edge engineering with sustainable development principles. The Riverside Bridge represents more than infrastructure. It's a testament to visionary leadership. I bit my tongue. The only vision Austin had was seeing his name on the project credits. While he talked about revolutionary design concepts, I remembered the late nights recalculating load distributions and the weekends spent on site making sure our specifications matched real-world conditions. The structural integrity analysis alone required months of sophisticated modeling, Austin continued, clicking through slides that displayed my stress calculations and load tables. We've accounted for everything from seismic activity to extreme weather patterns. The client looked up from his notes. "Tell me about the foundation work." Austin didn't miss a beat. Extensive geological surveys revealed optimal bearing capacity at 47 feet below grade. We're using drilled shaft foundations with reinforced concrete to handle the vertical loads. That was actually correct, which surprised me. Austin had clearly memorized the technical summary I'd written, even if he didn't understand what it meant. "What about lateral stability during construction?" the client asked. This time Austin hesitated, just for a second, but I caught it. Our phase construction approach ensures stability throughout the process. The client made another note. His questions were getting more specific, and Austin's answers were getting more generic. I could see sweat forming on Austin's forehead despite the air conditioning. "The environmental impact assessment mentions wetland mitigation," the client continued. "How are you handling the offset requirements?" Austin fumbled through his notes. We've coordinated with environmental agencies to ensure full compliance." That wasn't an answer, and everyone in the room knew it. The client set down his pen and looked directly at Austin. "Who actually designed this bridge?" The room went quiet. Austin's practiced smile flickered like a bad light bulb. "Well, our team approach means—" "I'm not asking about your team approach. I'm asking who did the engineering calculations." Austin glanced toward me, then back at the client. Mike provided technical support, but the overall project leadership and design vision came from Mike. The client turned to look at me. "Stand up." I felt every eye in the room shift to the back corner. This wasn't how these meetings usually went. I stood slowly, wondering what the hell was happening. "You designed this bridge?" the client asked. "Yes, sir. The structural design, foundation specifications, and construction sequencing are my work. The environmental mitigation plan? Mine as well. Took 4 months to coordinate with the Army Corps of Engineers and state environmental agencies." The client nodded slowly. And the load calculations Austin just presented? Every one of them. I can walk you through the analysis if you'd like. Austin's face had gone pale. Now wait just a minute. Mike is excellent at technical details, but I provided the strategic oversight. Strategic oversight. The client repeated the words like they tasted bad. Is that what you call taking credit for someone else's work? The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Charles Pemberton shifted in his seat, looking confused and concerned. Austin opened his mouth, but no words came out. That's when the client smiled, not a friendly smile, the kind of smile a shark gives right before dinner. Mike, we met this morning, didn't we? My stomach dropped through the floor. Rick? Richard Hoffman, CEO of Hoffman Engineering Solutions. And you helped me collect my tools when my inspection cart tipped over. The silence that followed could have been measured with a calendar. Austin's mouth hung open like a broken gate. Charles Pemberton looked like someone had just told him his company was on fire. You were testing us, I said quietly. Standard due diligence. I always want to know who I'm really doing business with. Hoffman turned back to Austin. And now I do. He closed his folder with surgical precision. I'm only working with Mike. Non-negotiable. Austin found his voice. This is ridiculous. I'm the project lead. Mike doesn't have the client management experience. He has something better, Hoffman interrupted. Integrity. I saw it this morning when he stopped to help someone he thought was just a working man. While you... Hoffman looked Austin up and down. While you walked past without a glance. Game over. Austin's carefully constructed empire was crumbling in real time, and everyone could see it happening. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises, but I knew the real war was just beginning. Austin might have lost the battle in that conference room, but guys like him don't go down without taking everyone else with them. Daddy's money and company influence gave him plenty of weapons, and I'd just painted a target on my back the size of a billboard. Hoffman left with a firm handshake and a promise to have his people contact me directly about project details. Charles Pemberton looked shell-shocked, like someone had just told him his golden boy wasn't actually made of gold. Austin slipped out during the congratulations, but not before shooting me a look that could have melted steel. I should have seen the retaliation coming, but I was still riding high on actually being recognized for my work. 20 years of watching other people take credit, and finally someone with real power had called them on it. For about 4 hours, I felt like I'd won something important. Then my computer access got cut. Temporary security review, the IT notification said. Please contact your supervisor for restoration timeline. My supervisor being Austin, of course. My project files vanished like they'd never existed. Email forwarded to Austin's assistant for coordination purposes. Classic corporate warfare executed with the precision of a surgical strike. By lunch, I was effectively locked out of my own project. 20 years of institutional knowledge, 18 months of bridge calculations, and my entire professional identity reduced to a guest login that could barely access the company directory. Patricia Williams from HR called around 2 p.m. Patricia was good people. Former Navy herself, worked her way up from administrative assistant to HR director over 15 years. If she was calling, it meant someone higher up the food chain had given her marching orders. Mike, I need you to come in for a discussion about some concerns that have been raised. What kind of concerns? Her voice carried that careful neutrality HR people perfect when they're delivering bad news. Austin mentioned there may have been some unauthorized client communication, protocol violations. I almost laughed. He's claiming I violated protocol by helping someone in the parking lot? Just come in at 4 p.m. Bring any documentation you have regarding client interactions. The beautiful thing about 20 years in corporate America is that you learn to cover your ass with documentation. Navy training taught me to keep records, and watching other good engineers get thrown under the bus taught me to keep better records. Every email, every calculation revision, every meeting note, I had copies of everything stored on my personal drives. I spent the afternoon building what I privately called my nuclear option file, time-stamped communications showing Austin's minimal involvement, project logs proving I'd done the technical work, security badge data showing my access patterns versus his, even metadata from Austin's original design documents, which turned out to be my preliminary sketches with his name swapped in. The really damning evidence came from Austin's own files. Kid was so arrogant he'd never bothered to cover his tracks properly. Email chains where he asked me to dummy down technical explanations for client presentations. Calendar entries showing him scheduling golf games during critical project milestones. Messages to his assistant about letting Mike handle the boring engineering stuff. At 4 p.m. sharp, I walked into Patricia's office carrying a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. She looked uncomfortable, which told me this wasn't her idea. "Mike, I need to ask about your interaction with Mr. Hoffman before yesterday's presentation. You mean when I helped him collect his inspection equipment after it spilled? You didn't know who he was? Thought he was a safety inspector. Guy needed help, so I helped him." Patricia made notes while I talked. "Austin claims you arranged to meet with Mr. Hoffman privately to undermine his presentation." I slid my documentation across the desk. Badge logs showing I'd parked in overflow because the main garage was full. Security camera timestamps proving I'd arrived at the normal time. Timeline showing less than 10 minutes between helping Rick and entering the presentation. Austin's claiming I orchestrated a meeting with a man I'd never seen before, in a parking lot I normally don't use at a time I couldn't have predicted. I kept my voice level. "That's quite a conspiracy theory." Patricia flipped through the evidence, her expression shifting as she absorbed the details. "This is very thorough. 20 years of Navy habits. Document everything, trust but verify." She spent 20 minutes reviewing my file while I sat quietly. When she finally looked up, her tone had changed completely. "Mike, I think there's been a significant misunderstanding about this situation. No misunderstanding from my end. I helped someone who needed it, did my job like always, and got accused of corporate espionage for my trouble." That evening, my phone rang. Thomas Russo from legal, calling from his personal cell instead of the office line. Thomas was old-school corporate lawyer, the kind who'd rather prevent problems than solve them after the fact. "Mike, we need to talk about the Hoffman engagement. There are some complications with the current project structure." "What kind of complications?" "Mr. Hoffman's people contacted us directly this afternoon. They want you designated as lead project engineer with full signing authority, effective immediately." I felt something shift in my chest. Not victory exactly, but the first taste of actual justice in 20 years. "And Austin?" Thomas paused. "Let's just say his role is being reevaluated by people much higher than either of us." "How much higher?" "Board level. Emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Mike, whatever you did to impress Hoffman, you just changed the entire power structure of this company." I looked out my kitchen window at Sophia's medical school acceptance letter, still pinned to my refrigerator. Sometimes doing the right thing pays off in ways you never see coming. The emergency board. The meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. sharp, which in corporate terms meant someone's career is about to end. I arrived 15 minutes early, partly from Navy habit and partly because I wanted to see Austin's face when he realized how badly he'd miscalculated. The boardroom was Pemberton Construction's inner sanctum. Mahogany panels, oil paintings of previous company presidents, and a table that had seen more power plays than a Washington back room. Charles Pemberton sat at the head looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. Helen Armstrong, the board chair, had that steely expression she wore when quarterly numbers disappointed. Thomas Russo from legal had a stack of documents that could choke a horse. Austin walked in 2 minutes late, which was unusual for him. Kid was normally punctual to a fault, especially when Daddy was watching. Today he looked rattled, like someone who'd spent the night trying to figure out how his sure thing had turned into a disaster. "Gentlemen, ladies," Charles began, "we have a situation that requires immediate resolution." Austin jumped in before anyone else could speak. "Dad, this whole thing is clearly a setup. Mike must have contacted Hoffman beforehand. There's no way a random encounter in a parking lot." "Austin!" Helen Armstrong's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Sit down and be quiet." I'd never heard anyone talk to Austin that way, including his father. The kid's mouth snapped shut like a trap. Helen opened her folder. "We've conducted a thorough review of project documentation and communications. The results are illuminating." She slid a report across the table. 20 pages of analysis, timelines, and evidence. My documentation from the previous day, cross-referenced with company records and verified by independent review. "According to our analysis," Helen continued, "Austin contributed minimal substantive work to the Riverside Bridge project. The engineering design, environmental compliance, and construction planning were primarily Mike's responsibility." Austin's face went white. That's not accurate. I provided strategic oversight and client management. You provided PowerPoint presentations, Thomas Russo interrupted. We've examined the metadata on every file you submitted. They're based on Mike's preliminary work with your name substituted. The room went dead quiet. Austin opened his mouth, then closed it again. Charles rubbed his forehead like he was fighting a headache. Austin, did you or did you not claim credit for work you didn't do? I managed the project. Management includes delegation and strategic vision. Management includes honesty, Helen snapped. Mr. Hoffman isn't stupid. His company ran their own investigation before making any commitments. That's when Thomas dropped the nuclear bomb. Mr. Hoffman's people provided us with their due diligence report. They've been evaluating our company as a potential long-term partner. The parking lot encounter was their final assessment. Austin's face went from white to green. Assessment? They wanted to see how our people behave when they think nobody important is watching. Mike demonstrated integrity and competence. Thomas paused. You failed completely. I stayed quiet through all this. Sometimes the best strategy is letting your enemies destroy themselves with their own words. Charles turned to me. Mike, Mr. Hoffman has formally requested that you be named Senior Project Director with full authority over the Riverside Bridge engagement. What's your response? I accept, I said simply. On one condition. The room waited. I want Austin transferred to a position where he can't interfere with the technical work, marketing, business development, somewhere his presentation skills might actually add value. Austin exploded. You can't be serious. I'm a Pemberton. This company bears my family's name. This company needs to survive, Charles said quietly. And right now, Mike is the only one Hoffman trusts to deliver. Helen Armstrong smiled for the first time all morning. Motion approved. Mike Torres is hereby named Senior Project Director for all Hoffman Engineering partnerships. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on anyone. Austin had spent 5 years positioning himself as the heir apparent, and in one morning he'd been demoted to middle management by his own arrogance. Charles stayed after the meeting ended. Mike, I owe you an apology. I let family loyalty cloud my judgment about capabilities. No hard feelings, I replied. Let's just focus on building good bridges. He almost smiled at that. Hoffman was right about you. You've got character. The contract signing was held 2 weeks later. $350 million deal, with options for 3 additional projects worth another $800 million. They held the ceremony in the main conference room with local media coverage. Austin was noticeably absent, probably in his new marketing cubicle learning the difference between strategy and actual work. Richard Hoffman shook my hand after the signing. Mike, this is just the beginning. I've got infrastructure projects across 6 states that need someone with your attention to detail and integrity. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the lessons in all this. Sometimes doing the right thing pays off in ways you never expect. Sometimes helping someone with spilled tools changes your entire life trajectory. And sometimes, just sometimes, competence and character actually matter more than connections and corporate politics. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Saw the news coverage, Dad. Medical school tuition is looking a lot more manageable now. Proud of you. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house I'd almost lost during the divorce. The promotion came with a 40% salary increase and stock options. Sophia's future was secure, and for the first time in years, so was mine. Best $350 million I ever earned. And it all started with helping a guy pick up his tools. Sometimes the good guys actually win.